Hey, what's going on, Trojan family? Welcome for a long time coming back to the Salute to Troy podcast with the man, the myth, the legend, the madman back with me. One of four of the whatever we call ourselves now with Tim and the coach who will be back soon. But madman, good to see you, brother. I know it's been a long traveling in June. You were in Europe. I was all across America, but it's good to be back on together with you. Just the two of us. It's been too long. How are you?
Doing great, Rye. Great to see you. Obviously, it's been a summer of travel, so we were all kind of doing our thing, and so excited to be doing this with you. Every time we get an opportunity where it's the two of us, it's super fun. I mean, I think a lot of our LAFB listeners, if you go back to the LAFB history, with the LA football
Archive.
show and all the different things, it's always been so much fun to be able to tag team things with you, and super excited to kick this off.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to see you. Missed you, and glad you've had a great trip and great summer. I was doing some like reconnaissance across like sports, just kind of, when you're in business, you always are looking at like the market and who does what. And it's funny because it's mainly in football, obviously not in like the baseball space, but like everyone took like June off. Like you go to all the other YouTube channels out there, and everyone was just like off when you look at NFL, college. So, we kept it punching, but it's good to be back on with you officially. And we're talking wide receivers. I think it'll be fun. We'll do some fun different segments as we build up for fall camp, which, are just about a month away. Usually end of July, beginning of August is when SC will launch their fall camp. I've done a ton of recruiting talks. It'll be fun, Madman, to actually just talk this actual team who's going to play football on Saturdays this season. And these two receivers, Jacoby Lane, Makai Lemon, I don't know if you've noticed this, Madman, but I feel like the last 2 weeks, like they've kind of risen to like getting a lot more talk and credit. We've
Yes.
seen, draft analysts talking about Makai Lemon maybe being the first receiver taken in the draft next year. We've seen other people talk about Jacoby Lane, the athleticism and stuff we've all talked about this whole time. So before we kind of get into these two guys and who we think will have the better season, what do you think has sparked this all of a sudden love for these two receivers out of nowhere?
Right. First of all, I mean, what outstanding coverage you've provided the network, over the course of the spring and whatnot with recruiting and all the various updates and the late breaking news, early breaking news, all of it. So we're all deeply, in gratitude of everything that you've done this spring for the network. But I think as a bridge, Ryan, I think it's funny how when you have the number one recruiting class for 2026, people start noticing the team more and start noticing, well, what's going on in 2025? Maybe I need to pay attention to this brand a little bit more and start kind of treating USC the way USC was treated in the 2000s. So I think, Ryan, it's a direct correlation of having the current number one recruiting class in 2026 and being so much in the news and so much in the limelight and beating out, these great teams for these top prized recruits. We were talking about it a few months back. If you recall, December, January, late last fall, when SC was getting guys, those guys' other offers were, not necessarily the creme de la creme of the Power Four. They were beating out kind of more mid-tier teams within the Power Four and whatnot. Now, when you look at these recruits, whether it's a Bowman or a Feaster or whoever it may be, I mean, and you look at the list of what their top four was and what their top six was, it's the who's who. I mean, it's the Ohio States, it's the Bamas, it's the Georgias, it's the LSUs. And so when you get that many eyeballs, even from those fans, because you're competing for the same player, now folks are going to start paying more attention, I think, to the larger team and the larger ecosystem. So I think in many ways, the recruiting success of the last 6 months, I think is going to help this current flock from a notoriety and a brand perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has to be part of it because other than that, because even like the new, Chad Savage now is with the team as the inside receivers tight end coach, but outside of that, like not much has changed from the Vegas Bowl against Texas A&M till now. And, we saw Jacoby Lane 3 touchdowns in that game. We saw Makai Lemon with some electric yards after the catch in that game, but not much else has changed to where all of a sudden, like the national scope is like,
Right.
oh man, these guys are ballers. Like they're going to be arguably the two best receivers outside of not named Jeremiah Smith in the Big Ten. And so it's just funny that, I do think that because of the recruiting wins that for whatever reason, even though it has nothing to do with this current team, it's like people are like, oh yeah, look at look at this talent here. There is some uncovered. Is USC wide receiver you again all of a sudden? So, I mean, it's great though. It's good to see. It's good for the brand. Good for these players. So,
No question.
Let me ask you this, unless you have anything else to add on that. Who do you, and I know who your guy is and who my guy kind of is, which is perfect for this conversation, but who do you think has the better season in 2025, Makai Lemon or Jacoby Lane?
Ryan, it's so funny. It's so fun to be talking about this right now in, July of 2025, because, and I know where I'm going with this, but if you kind of go back to, December of 2023, January of 2024, 18 months ago, and we were kind of talking about who are some hidden gems and who are some guys that can emerge. We talked Jacoby Lane back then. We talked Makai Lemon back then. And so I've always had a tremendous affinity for Jacoby Lane. He reminds me a lot of Dwayne Jarrett in terms of, frame and sort of agility and whatnot. But he's also got, incredible hands. And I think there's sort of an underrated toughness to him. And then when you look at a Makai Lemon, to me, he's so special, Rye, at sort of 5'11", but built like a running back. He sort of runs routes like a receiver. And then once he's got the ball in his hands, it feels like a running back in terms of that yak, and his running style and the way he holds the ball and how smooth he is. He actually reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara with the ball, but he's a receiver, prior to that. And so that versatility and that uniqueness, I think, makes him so special. I think, Ryan, to sort of answer your question, it kind of depends on what the definition of bigger year is in a lot of ways, because I think that Makai Lemon is probably going to have more receptions and yards than Lane, but I think Lane is going to have more touchdowns. And I think when you sort of think about, again, not just their entire body of work last year, but you really got to hone in on those last 4 games, because that's who your starting quarterback is going to be this year. And when you think about Jacoby Lane, once Maeva was inserted into the starting lineup, Rye, you mentioned the Vegas Bowl, but 12 receiving touchdowns last season, 7 were in those final 3 games. I mean, he didn't even play the Nebraska game, and he had 7 touchdowns the last 3 games. So 7 with Maeva and only 3 Maeva starts. And then when you look at Lemon, he had 2 big kind of 100-plus yard games. He had another 99-yard game, so roughly 300-yard games. 2 of those 3 were with Maeva. And so I think that when you look at kind of the dynamism of Lemon, I think you can get him the ball in more different ways. I think he can play the slot. I think he can play out wide. I think you can do end arounds with him. You can even put him in the backfield. He's going to be special teams. I think there's going to be a lot more touches and a lot more looks and versatility to getting him the ball and making more plays that I think is going to lead to more touches, more receptions, more yards. But I think ultimately the touchdown maker for, Jaden Maeva, red zone, tough situations, tough third downs, I think is going to be Lane. So I got Lemon with more receptions and yards, but I got Lane with more touchdowns.
Yeah, it's I totally agree with all of that. And yeah, it kind of depends on how you define, a better season. Cause I agree. I think Lemon will have more yards. I think Lane will have more touchdowns. When I think Makai Lemon, like the first word I think of is just consistency. I mean, he's a guy that's going to, when you need to move the chain, need to move the ball. Like, he's going to run a great route. He's got great hands. Like, he can do a little bit of everything. You kind of mentioned it, jack of all trades. And when you think of Jacoby Lane, you think game breaking, like a guy that can just 3 touchdowns out of nowhere, go the point of attack, jump ball. What he's able to do is just, highlight reel worthy. And even Lincoln Riley kind of said maybe some people took it as a slight. I don't think he meant it by any means, but he said basically he essentially said, I'm paraphrasing, but Makai Lemon may not be great at one thing, but he's just good at everything. He just does everything so well and so consistent. Whereas Jacoby Lane might not do everything as well, but he does a couple things great. So it's what makes him such a fun pair and what makes this season so exciting, because what we saw last year, Madman, with if you want to call them the 4 horsemen, you have these 2 plus Zachariah Branch and Deuce Robinson. They were just, you could never really get one of the guys in a rhythm because you had too many mouths to feed. They were trying to really push Zachariah Branch to be the guy, and he just didn't have the sophomore season. We've talked about it ad nauseum, so I don't need to talk about it more. But now you have 2 true top flight receivers, and then you can sprinkle in the likes of their running game. Plus, I think they're going to run more 12 personnel with these tight ends.
Yep.
And so you're going to get a lot more out of these guys. And so my next question for you, and this would maybe define who has the bigger season, is if all things go to plan and if USC has a good season, if these two guys have a great season, all indications are they will go to the NFL draft. Obviously, they still have eligibility left, but they would be, they're after their third season, so they could go. So if they did go, who gets drafted first? Is it Lemon or is it Lane?
Ooh, I love that. And it's a great thought exercise there, Ryan. I think one of the other reasons, just to sort of back up, and also this is sort of just a clever way for me to buy some time to think about the question that you've asked. But I think what makes these two guys special and why we're expecting such big things from them is, even though Lane, to your point, has the bigger catch radius and he's longer and you can kind of throw it anywhere and he'll make more spectacular plays, don't sleep on Lemon's ability to go attack the ball, when it's in the air. And even at 5'11", he's got that lower body strength to get leverage on a corner and almost like a great rebounder in the NBA, kind of out position to be able to go get the ball. He's not one of those guys that lets the ball come to him. He goes and gets the ball. And particularly when you've got Jaden Maeva, who throws a lot of deep balls, right? I mean, that's part of his arsenal. He's going to take shots. There's a lot of jump ball scenarios that are going to be there here in the 25 season, a lot of 50-50 balls. And so you need either someone that's going to really go and attack the ball that doesn't have kind of the wingspan and the radius, or someone like Lane that just has a significant radius. And I think that ultimately, more than anything else, in addition to all the points you laid out, is why the Deuce Robinsons and why the Zachariah Branches are no longer here, because it's, I think, that one skill set above everything else really aligned with Maeva. Now to your question about, hey, everything goes to plan, who's going to get drafted first? Wow.
It's tough.
Leinart the other day sort of compared Lemon to Amon-Ra. And I'm sure you sort of caught that. I see it in terms of frame, but I actually don't see it stylistically, in terms of what Leinart was saying. I think Lemon is the safer bet in the NFL, but I think Lemon will have a lower ceiling. If Lane is one of those guys that's higher risk because he only does a couple of things super elite, but if you hit on it and he gets really, really elite on those things, you're talking about a much higher ceiling. And I think the way NFL GMs think, particularly in the first round, they're going for those guys that they think can become absolute game changers and all pros. And I think they're willing to sort of take the risk rather than a guy that, hey, he's going to be more consistent, but I don't know if I see, the big year or the big ceiling or the big career. So I think for that reason, in terms of how GMs think, I would have Lane drafted higher, just because I think in this world of specialization, particularly in the NFL, as the talent just is so much more, to be super elite, or at least the potential of being super elite in one or two things, I think will outweigh being the jack of all trades, even though it's a phenomenal jack.
Yeah. Well, and it's so true, because it's just the way, like, the NFL and all leagues do this, right? But they'll see something successful, but still pull for something else. Like, they'll see what works, even though it's a copycat league in so many areas. When it comes to drafting, we see time and time again the type of style, the type of player, the type of skill set that is productive, and yet they'll still chase the pot of gold into the rainbow. Not saying that Jacoby Lane won't be that, it won't be great, but how often do we see guys like Amon-Ra go in the fourth round, Cooper Kupp go in the third round, Puka Nacua go in the fifth round? These jack of all trades, slot guys that are, good at everything, but not necessarily like the elite. But hey, guess what? They lead the NFL in receiving yards. They're top 5 in receiving yards. They're averaging 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, 10 touchdowns, but they're always going to go after the Mike Evans, the Mike Williams of the, those are the top 10 picks, those big bodies, catch radius, jump ball guys, which is what Jacoby Lane is. So again, all things being equal, if how the season goes, I agree. I think they're both fantastic. Love them both, love covering, but I think based on the way the NFL projects guys, Jacoby Lane will end up being the higher pick. But that doesn't mean Makai Lemon is not going to have a fantastic NFL career like all those guys I just mentioned who were taken in the mid rounds.
No, it's spot on, Ryan. It reminds me of this quote, really kind of more of, I think, of our parents' generation, where they used to say, no one ever got fired investing in IBM. And I think a lot of GMs sort of think that way, where it's like, hey, if I miss, I don't think someone's going to blame me for missing on someone like a Jacoby Lane, but someone may blame me for missing on a guy that maybe has a lower ceiling, because then you get to said, look, you should have just taken a shot on someone with a higher ceiling then. I think it's a lot of this sort of GM psychology of like, how do I protect my job? How do I justify if something goes wrong in terms of the decision making? And I think that's sometimes what we see, even though, to your point, man, if you just see the productivity on the field and you say, hey, this player resembles this player the most, and that player is tearing up the league, you're talking about NFL receiving Triple Crown or All Pro, like, why aren't you doing that? I think sometimes the objectivity goes away when you think about job preservation in the NFL.
Yeah. And the thing other people always say is like, well, yeah, but look, I was able to get this talent in the 4th round. Why would I take that in the 1st round? And it's like, well, 31 other teams passed on this guy 17 times or whatever, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I bet they would have liked to have taken him in the 1st round when you see what he is now. So if you like a guy, you take him then. You don't wait, and you get that 5th year option with the contract. But that's a whole nother conversation. So let's end with the segment with this, Madman, and I'll try to give you time to think because I'm kind of putting you on the spot. When you look at the Big Ten receivers, you look at the Jeremiah Smiths, Carnell Tates, Surratt in Indiana, like all these, obviously Oregon banged up now, but they have that 5+ star freshman coming in. Like, where do you stack Lemon and Lane just within the Big Ten kind of pecking order, if you will?
Right. I'll be honest with you. Well, this is an easier question for me. And that is, the best version of these two guys is number 2 and number 3 wide receiver in the conference. Yep. I mean, I think Jeremiah Smith is a unicorn. He's sort of one of one. That guy could have played in the NFL as a freshman. He's almost like, and I'm not a LeBron guy per se, but like LeBron was the one NBA prospect that was ready to play in the NBA as a freshman. In college and a senior in high school and whatnot. Jeremiah Smith was ready to play in the NFL last year. He's sort of on a different planet. But when you look at skill set and you look at productivity, these two guys, if it all hits, are as high as number 2 and number 3. That is their ceiling, and it's a stretch goal potentially, but it's well within the realm of possibility. When you look at what Lemon can do from special teams, from all 3 levels of strain on a defense, from all the different positions on the field that you can get him the ball. And when you couple that with an offensive mind like Lincoln Riley, look, the sky is the limit. And then when you look at Jacoby Lane and you talk about these big, tall receivers, the red zone targets, the big 3rd and 9 catches, and, his ability to kind of get to a level that very few, if any, corners or safeties can, as long as Maeva can stay consistent and can stay accurate in terms of finding his spots, you're talking about a situation where these two guys, to me, are number 2 and number 3 if it all hits.
Yeah, I mean, this show, we might as well just call it the agreement show, because, I totally agree. I mean, I think Surratt is a really interesting receiver at Indiana. Doesn't probably get the love he deserves nationally as much. But, I totally agree. If all things, the talent level alone, I would put these guys 2, 3. Like, the only thing that they wouldn't finish that is if this offense, spreads it around so much like they did last year, which I don't think they will as much. But if they go to that, or they run heavy a lot more, that'd be the only thing stopping them. But there's no reason why a Clay Helton offense in 2018 can have 3,000-yard receivers than this one cannot as well with Lincoln Riley at the helm. So,
let's not forget, Rye, that that Slovis year, 3,000-yard receivers. They had 400-yard receivers in the Victory Bell game, So, I mean, if you could do that with a Clay Helton regime, not too far-fetched to say you can have 2 of the top receivers in the conference in your starting lineup.
Yeah, easily. So I can't wait. But, these guys are going to be fun to watch all year long. What's crazy, Madman, is like they actually have 2 years of eligibility left. I believe they both redshirted their freshman year. Last year was their first, so they technically could stay for many more years, but most likely this will be our last year we get to enjoy them. So, and there's a reason SC's taken 5 or 6 receivers in this 2026 class to kind of replenish that when it happens. So, but should be fun. Great seeing you as always. Thank you, Trojan family. Make sure if you have not already, hit that like and subscribe button to the USC LAFB channel. You can find all of our USC content at LAFBnetwork.com. And if you prefer audio, just search Salute to Troy wherever you get your podcasts. For the Madman, I am Ryan Dyer. We'll be back with plenty more Trojan talk real soon.